In this video, we're going to talk about how stress plays such a role in hormonal health, including contributing to low progesterone. Period problems are on the rise, and so many women deal with low progesterone and which stress can cause. So stay to the end to know if this is for you. If you have not subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button to be notified anytime I post new content relating to women's health, hormones, or holistic health. Okay, so when we talk about hormones, we typically think of things like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, those kind of sex hormones that we talk about a lot, but there's actually a hormonal pyramid in which the bottom of it is insulin, cortisol, and adrenaline, and then a middle layer of hormones which are called precursor hormones, things like pregnenolone and DHEA, and then up at the very top of the pyramid are things like melatonin, estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, all of our other type of hormones. Pregnenolone is the precursor to things like progesterone, testosterone, and estrogen. So it's a super important player in our hormonal landscape and contributes to either good symptoms or bad symptoms, or rather our hormones acting with us and for us, or our hormones may be acting against us and causing a lot of symptomatic things like period problems. Pregnenolone also is a precursor to something like cortisol, which is our stress hormone. So when you are under a prolonged amount of stress, your body gets to decide, is pregnenolone going to produce cortisol, or is it going to produce things like progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone? Okay, so when we're stressed, and I like to create this subtle distinction, when we perceive stress, or our brains do, whether that's a threat, a danger, a stressor, overwork, being late, putting too much pressure on yourself, people pleasing, being a goodist, all of those different things, when your brain perceives that as a threat or a danger, it's going to ask your adrenal glands to produce cortisol and maybe adrenaline, norepinephrine for that fight or flight response. How we produce cortisol is we produce pregnenolone, and that goes down basically the pathway to get to cortisol. Mission accomplished, this is what it's supposed to do. However, all the resources that go down this path to produce cortisol over and over and over when you're under stress, after stress, after stress, then it does not go down the pathway to produce things like testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone. Progesterone in specific is really hard to produce for so many of us. I do so many different tests for women on hormones, and consistently I see progesterone and testosterone being low, in addition to DHEA, which is also an adrenal hormone. So when you're under a lot of stress, you can see this is called the pregnenolone steal, where pregnenolone's here and it's creating cortisol, your stress response, and it's not creating things like progesterone. And so when we talk about the pregnenolone steal, that's exactly what we're talking about. This precursor hormone pregnenolone is contributing to the stress response, which it needs to do. That's a more compensation mechanism for your body instead of producing progesterone. Think about your period, progesterone, that feels a little bit more optional to your body than the stress response. The stress response will always take precedent over really anything else in our body, any other function, because it's so life-saving. Your body, think about it, if you're being chased by a bear, you're under this big amount of stress, your body and your brain's biggest goal in life is to survive and make you live. And so if it feels like there's big stressors and threats and dangers out there, that's what its primary focus is going to be on. In addition to turning off things like the digestive system, you may have heard of like the phrase rest and digest versus the fight or flight. Again, this stress response is going to take over precedence. So I did a whole video all about how do you know if you have low progesterone, the symptoms of low progesterone. We've talked about this a few different times on this channel that I'll link in the description below so that you can kind of get some more info on progesterone in general. So real quick, I want to just briefly chat about a couple of symptoms that are low progesterone symptoms. So things like a short menstrual cycle or short luteal phase, so something like 25 days or less, is typically more of a progesterone deficiency. We really want to get that progesterone to rise up in that luteal phase, that second phase of the cycle, so that that can prolong your cycle out a little bit. So if you're having, 25 days or less of a cycle, you might want to actually get your progesterone checked or tested. In addition to, you can actually do a blood test to look at your pregnenolone too. So that can be helpful at kind of seeing like how much do you have of that. You can actually supplement with pregnenolone, but again, in my mind, we always want to get to the root of things. So in this case, that would be stress, instead of just always throwing in a new supplement to kind of help. Now, we could supplement with things for stress, something to help calm your nervous system down, in addition to doing some of the lifestyle things like we talked about in the adrenal fatigue video. But that would be one thing. Migraines, especially like menstrual migraines, could be another one. Spotting, if you're spotting for more than like 1 to 2 days before your period, that's a big sign of progesterone deficiency, that it's dropping off too fast. Things like anxiety, panic attacks, insomnia also are big signs of progesterone deficiency, because progesterone acts on our nervous system. It helps kind of regulate our stress response some, and it helps to act on GABA, which is a calming neurotransmitter in your brain. So this is kind of like the big kicker, right? Your progesterone, if you produce it in a good amount, helps you to alleviate stress, but stress actually depletes progesterone. So you can either get on a really good cycle with it where progesterone's kind of coming to the rescue, or if progesterone's deficient, then you kind of get into this vicious negative cycle where your stress response takes over, you don't have progesterone to help your stress response, and then stress takes over again. I kind of mentioned this briefly earlier in the video. This is about your perception of stress. So many women come to me and they're like, I can't do anything. I work a full-time job. I have 3 kids. I have this going on. My marriage is in trouble. We're having financial problems, etc., etc. I'm taking care of my family members. And we feel almost like we're in a really disempowered state. We feel like life's just happening to us. We're being bombarded by it. And I want to remind you that your brain reacts to your perception of what's going on. So I know that might feel a little bit hard to understand or hard to kind of react to, but if you can change your perception of things and come at it from a more empowered standpoint of, okay, this is a lot, I'm overwhelmed, I got this, that's gonna be a message of safety to your nervous system versus a message of danger. So Dan Buglio, who has a website called Pain For You, he talks a lot about these symptoms and how kind of like the mind-body connection works, and how the fight or flight response and nervous system being in a stressful state can contribute to physical symptoms too. He talks a ton about this. I'll leave his stuff in the description below too, but he talks a ton about messages of safety versus messages of danger. Are you constantly telling yourself, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed, I can't do this, you know, this is in trouble, I'm stressed, I hate this, I'm anxious, I'm this person, I'm miserable? Are you constantly telling yourself those things? Or despite what's going on, are you saying like, okay, I'm overwhelmed, I can do this, I'm gonna just chip away at these 3 things on my to-do list, and whatever doesn't get done is fine? Are you kind of questioning the perfectionism? So perfectionism, people-pleasing, being a goodist, those are all big personality characteristics which I employ. I have all 3 of them in my life that I've had to really dismantle. It's my life's work. I am never going to be through it, I don't think, but every time I kind of feel myself gravitating toward that, I kind of ask myself like, okay, where is this coming from? Why is it occurring? Where can I kind of like lessen the pressure on myself? Because that pressure to be perfect or please people or be like the good person is just, it's a lot of pressure, and it's really activating to your nervous system. So your body will respond for you and help you, but it's going to do it at an expensive cost of producing a lot of cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, those types of things. So I know that I didn't get into this too much, the mindset piece of this, but it is such a huge thing. And I talked all about it in my own journey about adrenal fatigue, which I'll link in the description below too, because that was such a missing link to my own adrenal fatigue healing journey of actually dismantling some of these things. So this is definitely one of the biggest causes that stress occurs in general. And like we're seeing, stress can cause a lot of physical symptoms, in which, you know, just adding a little bit of progesterone may not be the best thing. It may need to be something like you get to the root of what's actually going on, because adding progesterone could help some of the period symptoms, but this also causes digestive symptoms and neurotransmitter symptoms and inflammation symptoms and muscle aches and pains and low circulation and dry mouth and immune system dysregulation. Stress causes a lot of different things like that. And so you could just add a little bit of progesterone if somebody suggests that to you. But again, we're not going to get rid of the root of it. And so it's going to lead into these other things as well. So a couple things in addition to some of the mindset work, Make sure that you're eating at regular intervals. Intermittent fasting, if you're dealing with low progesterone, is literally one of the worst things you can do nutritionally. Make sure you're fueling your body with a lot of micronutrients at regular intervals. Keep that blood sugar stable, because that's also going to be a big stressor for you. Intermittent fasting is a huge stressor. I did a video about that. You can I'll link that in the description below too, so you can watch that. But you really want to make sure that you're filling your plate with protein, fat, and carbs, or protein, fat, fiber, because that's going to keep things stable and balanced. You certainly don't want to add any more stressors into your body from nutrition. I also recommend doing an adrenal cocktail every day to get those micronutrients. So whole food vitamin C, super, super helpful for the stress response in the adrenal glands. You want to make sure it's not ascorbic acid, but it's actually whole food vitamin C, like acerola cherry powder, or better yet, just the real thing like orange juice, grapefruit juice, lemon juice, lime juice, any of those things. You also can add some coconut water that has high amounts of trace minerals and potassium in there, electrolytes. And you can add either Redmond's real salt, or just like a fourth a teaspoon of a white Celtic salt. That's really, really helpful for doing an adrenal cocktail. You also want to make sure, like I said, you're just eating fruits and vegetables, your animal proteins, your fiber. You want to make sure you're getting in just nutrient-dense foods to really support your body through the stress, because stress can also deplete your minerals, and minerals also help produce hormones. You also want to make sure you're not exercising too intensely, so maybe like leisure walking, some strength training, but you certainly don't need to be doing HIIT workouts or intense exercise 60 minutes a day, 6 days a week. That's going to cause more stress and inflammation, therefore depleting pregnenolone and progesterone, estrogen, testosterone further. And you also want to make sure that you are sleeping. If you don't have a small child that's waking you up every night, do the best you can if you have that going on, but make sure that you're prioritizing your sleep. You're not scrolling Netflix or your phone at midnight every night. Try to really get 8 hours of sleep if you can. That's definitely going to help your body reset. And then a few supplements in addition to like the adrenal cocktail and just nutrient-dense foods, things like phosphatidylserine, L-theanine, rhodiola, ashwagandha. There's a formula that I really like that's called Cortisol Calm from Pure Encapsulations. You can get that on Welevate for 20% off. And it's a great one to take for mood, rest, relaxation, and sleep support. Again, please make sure this is gonna work for you, and medications, medical conditions, it's not medical advice, but it's something that I really like. In any of those herbs and supplements are helpful at just kind of calming down that nervous system if you feel like you're somebody who's always tired and wired, having a hard time sleeping, all of that stuff. You want to make sure if you're going to take things that are calming to your nervous system, you don't already have low cortisol though. If you're, exhausted, can't function, you're groggy all the time, you like to sleep 12 hours a night, this is probably not the formula for you. You probably need something more like medicinal mushrooms, licorice root, ashwagandha, those types of things to kind of help boost your cortisol level up and support your adrenals that way. But like I said, adrenal cocktails, you guys, are so fantastic for the adrenals. They really, really make such a huge difference. I've noticed it in myself, and so many patients come back to me after they've started adrenal cocktails, even after having done like all the adaptogens and all the herbs and things like that, and they're just like, wow, this is like so simple, but it just feels good. It makes you feel good. It supports your adrenals and your nervous system and your mineral function and all of that stuff in such a great way. This is kind of how progesterone or stress can deplete progesterone and, like I said, other hormones, and also lead to other health conditions. So focus on your overall stress load and see if you can get some of that out of your stress reservoir so that you don't have so much stress in your body. I also want to just remind you, I've talked about this a few times, but I have a new course called The Period Solution, which is designed for women who want to get rid of their period problems. Anything from PCOS, hypothalamic amenorrhea, PMS symptoms like fatigue, breast tenderness, acne, yeast infections, cramping, spotting, all of the different symptoms that we can have. There's individualized protocols for every single one of those things in there. So if you're sick of like figuring out what to do, maybe you want to get off birth control because you know that's a band-aid approach to this. Maybe you're sick of going to practitioner and you just need to know exactly what to do. This is the course for you. Like I said, there's so many different individualized protocols in there. And for those of you who do not want to spend hours going through an online course, there is a TLDR version of this. So you just go to what you're dealing with, general maintenance of periods section, and get on your way. For those of you who want all the education and want to know everything about your period, that's all in there too. So it's called The Period Solution. It's at allydamron.com/period. And I'll leave that in the description below as well. I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day. If you have not subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button to be notified anytime I post new content relating to women's health, hormones, or holistic health. I'll see you in the next one.